In this video, we will do a full SAT reading passage walkthrough. I'm Kat Severson, the inventor of the Severson method, a scientifically proven way to learn and read anything fast and effectively. In this video, we're going to talk about a specific SAT passage from Official Test 6. It's the second passage. And I absolutely love this passage because it has a lot of little details that untrained test takers may miss and therefore lose valuable points. There is a couple of evidence-based questions. Those are the questions that have two parts to it. And there's definitely a graph, which could be super confusing if you don't know what you're looking for. So click on the link below this video. This is going to take you to the College Board website and download the passage. Try to solve it by yourself if you'd like, or you can just continue watching and we can solve it together. All right, I'll help you pay attention to every little answer choice, and I'll try to point out some common traps, and I will try to describe why exactly I chose a particular answer choice and what makes it 100% correct. All right, let's do this. So the passage is from Contemporary Times, 2009, and it's Public Trust in the News. Okay, and we're just going to skip the passage for now. We have a graph, and let's read the questions. The main purpose of the passage, I like to leave this question for last because once I go through everything, then I can clearly see the purpose. According to the passage, which expectation do traditional authorities now face? So there's traditional authorities and they face some sort of expectations now. By the way, this is a paired question that has lines. This is called evidence-based question. So what I suggest to do is I suggest to put a circle around question number 12 to signify to my future self that has already read the passage that this question 12 has a brother or sister, however you want, and we should be solving this question backwards. I always suggest that we approach the question from the back. First we find the lines and then we answer the question. I'm going to show it to you a couple of times because we have it twice in this passage. It's a very, very effective way to solve this and to know exactly what the College Board wants to learn from you. Question number 14. This is vocabulary in context. As used in line 24, common most nearly means. I'm just going to quickly jump to line 24. I'm going to find the word common and I'm going to put number, the question number 14 next to it. So as I'm reading here, as I finished reading and I went to the end of the sentence, I can be able to answer the question right away. I like to do it this way. 15. The author most likely include the extended quotations in lines 43 to 53 too. So basically this is a function question, and if you've ever watched any of my videos, you probably know that I'm going to completely ignore most likely. The authors include extended quotations too. There's only one function and it's explicitly spelled out in the text and we just need to find it. The words most likely, most nearly, these words are there to confuse you. They're there to kind of propel you get into your analysis paralysis and try to kind of push you to get into your English class mode and try to analyze. You can't do that here. You have to go directly by the text. So let's go and kind of identify. This is going to be for question 15 and this is going to be a function question. Sometimes I put an F for myself so that I know that I have to be paying attention to what the function of this in the text. Number 16, the authors indicate that the public is coming to believe something and that the journalist reports should avoid something. So this is just kind of giving me some hints about what to be paying attention to. And again, number 17, you have your answer choices. Therefore, we're going to put a circle around 16. So 16 and 17, they go together. 18, as used in line 74, raw most nearly means. Raw is I call them VICs, vocabulary in context. So I'm going to go and find line number 74. I'm going to underline the word raw And I'm going to put the question number. Do you remember what the question number was? It was 18. So that when I'm reading this line, I can immediately go ahead and solve this problem. Based on the table, and this is just going to be a graph, which statement's best supported by the table? This is a graph question, and this is a graph question. I'm just going to put GGG, which means I'm not going to deal with it now. I'm only going to deal with it once I'm done with the text. Okay, let's do it. The news is a form of public knowledge. Okay, so he's talking about news as public knowledge. Unlike personal or private knowledge, and then in parentheses, he's basically explaining what he means by personal or private knowledge, such as the health of one's friend and family, the conduct of a private hobby, a secret liaison, please somebody correct me. Public knowledge increases in value as it is shared by more people. So, contrast, public knowledge, private knowledge. The date of an election and the claims of rival candidates, the causes and consequences of an environmental disaster, a debate about how to frame a particular law, the latest reports from a war zone, dash. These are all examples of public knowledge that people are generally expected to know in order to be considered informed citizens. Okay. Thus, in contrast to personal or private knowledge, which is generally left to individuals to pursue and ignore, public knowledge is promoted even to those who might not think it matters to them. In short, the circulation of public knowledge, including news, is generally regarded as the public good, which cannot be solely demand-driven. Personally, I'm so happy that I just read the questions first, because now I'm not obsessing around the difference between public and private knowledge and what's what. There isn't a single question about that. So this paragraph is there to just confuse you. There are funny punctuation, like you see some parentheses and you see dashes, but it actually, I don't think that there's a question about this portion of the text. So it's just there to confuse you. And that's kind of the reason why I want you to read the questions first, and for many other reasons. Next. Second paragraph, the production, the circulation, and the reception of public knowledge is a complex process. It's generally accepted that public knowledge should be authoritative, but it's not always common agreement about what the public needs to know, who is best placed to relate and explain it, and how authoritative reputations should be determined and evaluated. All right, common agreement. 14, numerous, familiar, widespread, or original, or ordinary. Well, common, these words are all synonyms of the word common. And in one way or another, they could replace the word common. But in this particular sentence, we have to choose one that could be easily plugged in back into the sentence. But there is not always some kind of agreement about what the public needs to know. There's not always a widespread agreement. Ordinary agreement, no. Familiar agreement, no. Numerous agreement, no. Widespread agreement. Great. Let's continue. Historically, newspapers such as the Times and broadcasters such as BBC were widely regarded as the trusted shapers of the authoritative agendas and conventional wisdom. They embodied the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of authority as the power over or title to influence the opinions of others. As a part of the general process of transformation of authority, whereby there has been a reluctance of uncertainty, accept traditional sources of public knowledge, the demand has been of all authority to make explicit frames, the demand. I remember there was somewhere in the questions where they talked about the expectation, so I'm thinking maybe demand, expectation, explicit frames of value which determine their decisions. Centers of news productions, as our focus groups show, have not been exempt from this process. Not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about this negotiation of their authority. So let's move on here. We have a question about the function of this, so we have to think. What's before it is some news journalists feel uneasy about this negotiation of their authority. So apparently, there's an authority of public knowledge and public news, and there's a negotiation about their authority, and journalists are pissed off. So let's see. Editors are increasingly casting a glance at the most read lists on their own and other websites to work out which stories matter to readers and viewers. And now the audience, which used to know its place, is being asked to act as a kind of journalistic, I'm not sure what that word is, ombudsman, ruling on our credibility. Broadcast Journalist 2008. The result of democratizing access to TV news could be political disengagement by majority and a dumbing down through a popularity contest of stories. All right, so let's go and look at question number 15 and see if we can answer. The author include the extended quotations to do what? Let's go from D. Suggest viable alternatives. It does not suggest any alternatives. Criticize typical viewpoints. It does criticize, but it doesn't criticize typical viewpoints. It criticizes the process. Cite representative opinions. Well, that's probably true because what is right before it? They feel uneasy about this renegotiation of their authority. And then, what exactly do they feel? So this seems like a good option. Cite representative opinions. Represent contradictory examples. These examples are not contradictory. The answer is B. We can move on. Despite the rhetorical bluster of these statements, they amount to more than straightforward professional defensiveness. In their reference to an audience which used to know its place and conflation between democratization and dumbing down, they are seeking to argue for a particular mode of public knowledge, one which is shaped by experts, immune from populist pressures, and disseminated to attentive but mainly passive recipients. It is a view of citizenship that closes down opportunities for popular involvement in the making of public knowledge by reinforcing the professional claims of experts. The journalists quoted above are right to feel uneasy, for there is, at almost every institutional level in contemporary society, skepticism towards this epistemological authority of expert elites. There's a growing feeling, as expressed by several of our focus groups participants, that the news media should be informative rather than authoritative. The job of journalists should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. And people should be given sufficient information from which we would be able to form opinions of our own. So we have vocabulary in contest. We have question number 18, raw. Let's see what our answer choice is. Unfiltered, exposed, harsh, inexperienced. Okay, so the job of a journalist should be to give the news as, the word is unfiltered. It's not exposed, it's not harsh, it's not inexperienced. It's at stake here are two distinct conceptions of authority. The journalists we have quoted are resistant to the democratization of news. The supremacy of the clickstream, according to which editors raise or lower the profile of stories according to the number of readers clicking on them online. The parody of popular culture with serious news, the demands of some audience members for raw news rather than constructed narratives. Okay, so we shall start. Again, I'm going to skip the main purpose for now. According to the passage, which expectation traditional authorities now face? I'm going to go here first, and I'm going to get my lines. From 2 to 5, unlike people. I'm going to flip here, and I'm going to find unlike personal or private knowledge, such as the health of one's friends and family, the conduct of private hobby, a secret liaison, public knowledge increases in value as it's shaped by more people. Okay. Public knowledge increases in value as it's shaped by more people. It does not give us any information about an expectation from traditional authorities, so that's out. 20 to 21. Remember, our lines have to include something about the question, expectations, and from traditional authorities that now face. We didn't find anything. We need traditional authorities, and we need expectations, and we need current times, at least these three things. 20 to 21, the production process. The production, circulation, and reception of public knowledge is a complex process. This gives us nothing. 33 to 38, as part decisions. 33, as part of the general process of transformation of authority, there you go, transformation of authority, whereby there has been a reluctance to uncritically accept traditional sources of public knowledge, the demand, again, the expectation has been for all authority to make explicit frames of value which determine their decisions. To make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. Well, let's look at the answer choices. They should be transparent about their beliefs and assumptions. They should make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. This is a classical restatement. Hopefully, we can put these two phrases side by side. They should be transparent about their beliefs and assumptions and make explicit the frames of value which determine their decisions. These are saying the exact same thing different ways. Therefore, it's a classical restatement. Well, there's probably not a lot of value in looking at A, B, and C, but we're still going to do this as trained test takers just to make sure we didn't come up with something that doesn't exist. They should be respectful of difference between public and private knowledge. Well, do you remember how I told you that the first paragraph is talking about public and private knowledge? And if you chose the lines from the first paragraph, 100% you're going to choose that. But C is incorrect. It's a classical trap. It means supported in the passage but does not answer the question because it's not an expectation from traditional authorities. It's not something that they now face. They should be committed to bringing about positive social change. All right, this answer choice is also incorrect because there's nothing in the quotes that talks about this, but this sounds like a good idea. They should be committed to bringing about positive social change. So this is an answer trap that says true in the real world, not supported by the passage. Now let's look at A. They should be influenced by commercial considerations. Well, let's see, maybe 43 to 46 will point us to that. Editors, viewers, 43. Editors are increasingly casting a glance at the most read list on their own and other websites to work out with stories. Oh, I see. So they're trying to take this quote and they're trying to have D be supported by A. Such trickery, SAT. But the truth is that D is not providing evidence to this question, which expectations traditional authorities now face. Everything is in the detail. Yes, there is definitely a connection between D and A, but it does not answer this question. Therefore, I'm going to go with D and C. Now we answered 14, we answered 15, let's go to 16. Oh, 16 and 17 is also an evidence-based question. So first things first, let's read the question. The authors indicate that the public is coming to believe that journalists' reports should avoid. Okay, so another thing, something that journalists' reports should avoid, and public. So there are three components we need to have. Journalists' reports. There should be avoiding something. And there should be public that is expressing this opinion. We need to find quotes that include all of these three things. So let's go from lines 12 to 16. Thus, them. Let's flip back here. Thus, in contrast to personal or private knowledge, which is generally left to individuals to pursue or ignore, public knowledge is promoted even to those who might not think it matters to them. Well, none of these three are in here. Goodbye, answer choice A. 30, next one is 30 to 33, they, others. 30, They embodied the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of authority and the power over or the title, influence, and opinion of others. This does nothing. It does not talk about journalist reports. It does not talk about avoiding. It is not expressing public opinion. Goodbye, answer choice B. Lines 40 to 42, not surprisingly, authority. It's 40, so that's from here. Not surprisingly, perhaps some news journalists feel uneasy about the negotiations of their authority. Does it talk about journalists' reports that are avoiding something? Does it talk about public opinion? Nothing. So C is also incorrect. So we're fairly certain that D is the correct answer choice, but let's still check. There's 7 lines, so hopefully there'll be something of interest here. 70. There's a growing feeling, as expressed by several of our focus groups participants, that's your first thing, which is the public, that the news media should be informative rather than authoritative. The job of the journalist should be to give the news as raw as it is without putting their slant on it. So journalist reports are included and they're avoiding something. They're telling them to avoid putting their slant on it. And the people should be given sufficient information from which we would be able to form opinions of our own. It's too easy. So D is our answer choice. So now we have to go back to 16 and find exactly what D points to. Let's start at D. Details that the subject of the news reports wish to keep private. Again, they keep pointing us to the first paragraph. And I'm sure a lot of students would get trapped there, because if they thought that lines 12 to 16 prove that, then the answer choice would be D. It's absolutely not. Quotations from authorities on the subject matter. Well, is it something that they should avoid on the subject matter? Oh, so quotations from authorities on the subject matter. Is that something that journalists' reports should avoid? I did not see any of this. More information that is absolutely necessary. They should avoid more than absolutely necessary. We have nothing about that. So A is personal judgment about events and events reported. So journalist reports should avoid personal judgments about the events reported. That is directly connected to D. We are happy, and we're actually done with the text now because the other 3 questions have to do with the graph. Let's go back to 11 and see what was the main purpose. For questions like this, I try to first cover up the answer choices, and I try to come up with my own answer first. And whatever I said, I would then try to match what I just said to the writing here. So I think that he's talking about, I will always use the title, Public Trust in the News. He's talking about how public trusts the news and how public started to trust the news less, and how the new developments have changed, how public knowledge gets created, and then that the public is now demanding a lot from the publishing authorities. Yeah, something like that. Challenge the conventional view that news is a form of public knowledge. No, it does not do that, but very sneaky, because news is a form of public knowledge. That's the first sentence. And they fit in the first sentence. And so if you're taught that the first sentence and the last sentence are the places where the main meaning lies, you're going to get this question wrong. C. Show how journalists' frames of value influence the production of news stories. Okay, so it does talk about frames of values right there, frames of value. And it's talking about the production of news stories, but that's not the main meaning. That's not the main purpose. It's not showing. If it was showing the journalist frames of values, then it would be talking about, well, if you're valuing this, then you're going to write about that. If you're valuing ballet, you're going to be writing about that. So C is incorrect. B. Discuss changes in the perception of the news media as a source of public knowledge. Is it talking about changes in the perception of the news as a source of public knowledge? Maybe, because the production, circulation, and reception of public knowledge is a complex process. It is generally accepted that blah, 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 despite the rhetorical bluster. And, well, basically, what I said was that he's talking about how people used to view news as a form of public knowledge, and now how people start to collaborate with the writers, how they are warning them against putting their own filter on it, how they want them to just give raw information and not be biased and be influenced by any other commercial sources. A, analyze the technological developments that have affected the production, circulation, and reception of news stories. All right, so this is a good answer apart from one word: technological developments. It's not only about technological developments, it's also about people's perceptions and what has happened affected the production, circulation, and reception of the news, but it is not just analyzing technological developments. So therefore, because of this phrase, this answer choice is incorrect. Now we're done with all the text-based questions. Now let's go back to graph. Graph is very, very important. So question 19 is asking us, based on the table, in which year were the people most trusting of the news media? And we're given a bunch of years. Okay, let's flip back. And there are a few things that you must notice about any chart, any graph. What is it called? Percentage of responders seeing news stories as inaccurate or favoring one side. And these are years. And these are some thoughts. So some people believed that news organizations get the facts straight. So in 1985, 55% of people believed that. Then in 1992, 49, 36, 39, and now in 2011, only 25% of people believe that news organizations get the facts straight. And the question is asking us, in which year were people most trusting of the news media? Well, I think it's kind of possible for us to infer that it was 1985, but let's also scan the other questionnaires. Often have inaccurate stories. 34% said that the news organizations had inaccurate stories in 1984, but in 2011, they thought that 66% of people thought that news organizations give inaccurate stories. So if you look through these questions, you will notice that 1984 was the time when people were most trusting to the news, so we're going to go with A. Another graph question is number 20. Which statement is best supported by information presented in the table? This is a very, very good question, and so many students lose points on it because they start to read between 1985 and 2011, the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically. Let's take a look. 1985, often have inaccurate stories, and then 2011, news organizations often have inaccurate stories, 66%. It does sound like, well, the percentage has grown dramatically. A lot of students, untrained test takers, are going to say that that's accurate. And I, to be honest, also said, oh yeah, sure. And then I went to B, because as a trained test taker, I'm going to evaluate all 4 answer choices before I come to my final conclusion. So A currently is like a possibility. Let's look at B. Between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people who believed that the news organizations were biased almost doubled. So 1992 to 2003, where is the bias? Deal fairly tend to favor one side. Tend to favor one side is exactly the bias. And they're talking about 2 years between 1992 and 2003. and they're talking about almost doubling. Between 1992 and 2003, the proportion of people that thought that on political and social issues, news organizations tend to be biased or favor one side went from 63% to 66%. That's not doubling, because doubling would be over 100%. Therefore, B is incorrect. It's not supported by the table. But let's take a look at C. Between 2003 and 2007, people's views of the accuracy, independence, and fairness of news organizations changed very little. 2003 and 2007. So we are actually considering everything about 2003 and 2007. When we compare the numbers, it looks like it did change very little. 36, 39, 56, 53, 8, 8, 23, 23, 70. And they started to scratch my head. I'm like, all right, what is going on, Katya? Why are you looking at two answer choices that could work? Did you misread something? And I have to tell you that I did. Because for A, between 1985 and 2011, the proportion of inaccurate news stories rose dramatically. That is not supported by the passage. Because what does this say? The proportion of inaccurate stories. What does it mean? That means there's, out of 100 stories, 60 of them were accurate and 40 were inaccurate. And now that is, let's say, statistics in 85, and this is statistics in 2011. Now, only 20% of stories are accurate and 80% are inaccurate. That would be a drastic change. That would be something changing drastically. But do we even have this statistic? Remember how I told you how it is very important to read the title? This is not the percentage of the stories. This is the percentage of responders seeing news stories one way or another. Therefore, A is incorrect and C is correct. But again, we're not going to stop at C. We're going to look at D. Between 2007 and 2011, people's perception, that news organizations are accurate increased, but people's perception that news organizations are fair diminished. I don't think we have data for that, so D is definitely wrong. One last graph question left. In 2011, data in the table best serve as evidence of. Okay, we need to kind of look at this table as a whole and see what does this say. It is talking about the fact that people used to trust authority and media more. News organizations get the facts straight. 55% of people believe that. Now only 25% of people believe that. People used to believe back in 1985 that news organizations are pretty independent. 37% of people thought that. Now only 15% of people think that. Only 53% of people back in 1985 thought that news organizations are often influenced by powerful people and organizations. Now 80% of people believe that. So what is this saying? It's talking about that people are declining in their trust to news organizations. So which quote is supporting the statement? Let's start at D. The supremacy of the clickstream. Well, clever, good job, SAT, but it's not that. It's too narrow. Skepticism towards the epistemological authority of expert elites. Sounds good. Let's leave it as an option. The professional claim of experts. Well, it's nothing to do with the decline of authority. Political disengagement of the majority. We have no information about political disengagement. It's talking about how they stopped trusting the news organizations, but has nothing to do with them being engaged politically. So A is incorrect. C is skepticism towards the epistemological authority of expert elites. This is a classical example of a demonstration. This is the scenario, while this is the summary. I really hope that this made sense to you guys, and I know this might have taken longer than you have on the SAT, but I was talking, I was stopping, I was making comments. It shouldn't be taking you anywhere longer than 11 and a half minutes. So what did you guys think? Did you like this video? If you did, please give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and don't forget, every time you leave me a comment, you enter into the pool where we choose one lucky person every month to get some free tutoring from me. I will reach out to you personally. I will DM you on YouTube, and you could see the draws every month. We make them on the Instagram. The Instagram is Seriously Method, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Let me know how you do. Let me know what struggles you have with your SAT reading, if you have any. Bye.